to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.net. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. You know, I'm happy that you're here. This is my favorite part of the week. Now, as you listen to the show, I really hope you feel my passion about helping you. You know, when we hear that word change or change is thrust upon us, right? We get that knot in our stomach of, oh, here we go again. What do I do now? So I really hope between my guests and I that we help you maneuver through whatever change you're facing today. Now, to help you on your mindset shift of change to yay, change, I have a free gift for you. It's my free communication style assessment. I offer it every week. If you have not taken it, highly recommend you do. You'll get 2 reports, one spotlighting your superpowers on how you show up or how people perceive your messaging as you communicate. Kind of important to know. We want to lean into those strengths. Flip side, you get your lowest score, which is your blind spot or how we aren't aware that we're showing up a certain way. And that report will also help you navigate through whatever change you're dealing with. So the link is in the show notes, my gift to you. I hope you take advantage of that. And then additionally, if you're loving the show, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And sharing is caring. If you share it with your peeps, I so appreciate that as well. Now, my motivational quote to get us into the mindset for today's show is by Yohance Salimu. And Yohance says, "We shine bright so that others may shine brighter." You know, as I searched, every week I search for that perfect quote for this show. I wasn't sure what I was looking for today, and you'll understand why in a minute. And then I read this quote and it just came together for me. I believe that we really do all have gifts that we should be sharing out in the world, and understanding or clearly seeing our own gifts. I don't know that we always see it with ease. And you know the saying, right? You can't see the forest from the trees because we're in the throes of our own stuff. And when we're too close to our own stuff, life situation, I think it really is sometimes hard for us to see with that clarity. The other thing I liked about this quote was the idea that as we shine brighter, we illuminate that path for others. And for me, it's really always been about community and serving others, and believe that together we really can make an impact on this earth, one person at a time. And I know this is such a deep topic, and my guest today, he's amazing. His name is David Richards, and David and I, we're going to discuss his book. It's Love Letters to the Virgin Mary, The Resurrection of King David. And I don't think it's going to be religious as much as it's going to be spiritual. So lock and load here, guys. You're in store. David is a life strategist, international best-selling author, and an executive coach. He's been teaching yoga for 15 years, and he served in the Marines for 15 years. So really kind of a cool perspective of who he is. And he helps people achieve the extraordinary. So please help me welcome David back to the show. This is his second time. He premiered on June 8th of 2022, for those listening in the future, episode 245, where we discussed one of his other books. Again, a wealth of information. Highly recommend you listen to that show as well. So David, thank you so much for being on. I love having you on.
Connie, thank you so much. And how cool is it that we're recording this on Veterans Day? So even a bonus, it's awesome. But I am so thrilled to speak with you again. I had such a great time when we first met, and just can't wait to be here again. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, dude, you're interesting to me. You have this, military Marine dude who does yoga and is all about mindset, right? And this executive coaching, so we get out of our own way. And the blend of that tough versus that soft, I find fascinating, but also helpful, because I think we often say, well, I can't do that. That's not me. If someone like you, and I say that with love, right? This Marine, this very military, structured, disciplined background, can embrace that spiritual side and share love in the world. Like, wow, you're just, I think you're cool.
I appreciate it. No, I appreciate it. Well, and that's, we're all on a journey, and I grew up in the military, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be a writer, but no concept of how to make that work. And so I kind of fell into the routine of, I'm just going to follow in my dad's footsteps. And I joined the military, but I always knew there was something inside that kind of called to me. And that ultimately led me to yoga. That wasn't part of my plan when I got out, but I immediately fell in love with yoga. And that is the journey to spiritual awakening is both extraordinary and sometimes painful. But when you realize there's something to awaken, then it becomes truly extraordinary.
Yeah, and that's why I loved my quote, because I felt like you shine so brightly to help illuminate others, right, on their
Yep.
path through the executive coaching and the books you write. It just, as soon as I saw it, I was like, yes, this is what I was looking for. It was divine intervention, David. I swear it was divine intervention, because I was really struggling with a quote for the show for today. All right, so last time we spoke, it was back in June of this year of 2022. What have you been up to, just to give everybody kind of again, you're still on this journey, but what has it been since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, it's been quite busy. So obviously, I know we're going to talk about the book. I finished the book really in August. I wrote the first draft New Year's Day. I finished it New Year's Day this past year, and then took about 3 or 4 months off to decompress, and then went through it again, finished it in August. I built an online course on absolute certainty, so how to master absolute certainty in your life. And then I'm also working on a program about how to turn your life, or how to live like you're in a movie.
Oh, that sounds fun. We'll have to do a show on that
Yeah.
one when that comes out. But the
Sounds
last
good.
show we did in June was about that certainty. So now you have a
Yep.
program out as well. So everyone go back and listen to that show for sure. Wow, another brilliant approach of how to create that certainty right in our life, and kind of identify it like you identified with the yoga, right?
Yep.
That you came from this military background and then yoga called to you. It's like, wait, what? And yet you leaned into that, and magic is now happening for you, which is just really cool. All right, the book, Love Letter to the Virgin Mary, the Resurrection of King David.
Yep.
What's the story maybe behind the title? Start with that, because I found that very interesting, because this is not a religious show at all. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow. So the story. So one of the hitches in my giddy up as a writer is I can't write the book or this whatever it is until I have the title. And I started work on this book in October of 2019, to give you some perspective.
Wow.
So, but back then it was really this, it was going to be called Being, BEING. And it was just this idea, partly to understand what is our fascination with social media. And at the time, we were checking our phones on average, I think 85 times a day. And now it's up to like 125 times a day. And I wanted to know, like, to what end are we doing that? Like, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
And as I really kind of, as the year ended and it came January, I really started devoting some time to it. And it really became down to this idea that who we are is more important than what we do. But what we do is always shaping who we are. And so there's and that's the be, do, have, and all that. And then as the pandemic started to set in, I had a spiritual, very transcendent moment, and saw a picture of someone that I on Instagram, and was really blown away by the picture. And I'm like, this picture is going to become part of the story. Like, and suddenly it was no longer going to be called Being. That was going to become something else. But really for 2 years, I wrestled with what to call this thing. I guess I should say until November 2021. So yeah, about 2 years. And last summer, or the summer of 21, it was going to be called Who Holds Mary. And the whole idea was that the Virgin Mary must have a special place in heaven because of what she did. And that stuck with me for about 3 or 4 months. And then it came around this time last year. It just didn't feel right. And so I had thousands of pages of journal notes that I had taken over the course of the past 2 years. And I was just so exasperated. I was like, what is this? What is this? And the answer that came back was Love Letters to the Virgin Mary. I was like, okay, I can deal with that. And then really the resurrection piece didn't kick in until probably January, after I'd written the first draft. But it was just this idea of how to tell a really beautiful story that isn't religious, with two powerful historical figures. And if I had to really describe it, it's kind of like Gladiator, like Russell Crowe from Gladiator.
Yes.
meets the Avengers. Like, that's sort of the cross between ancient Roman superhero movies. So
I love it. Again, creativity. So a couple of things, just for the listeners, if anybody's thinking about writing a book, the pains that we go through as authors, not only to write the content, sometimes it's easier than others, right? But getting that title and then reiterating the title. I remember when I was doing my book, like I'd be in the car and I'd think of a title, I'd pull my phone out and I'd talk into the microphone. Possible title, blah, 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 whatever. And I had a whole bunch of these. And then afterwards, you're like, what was I thinking? Like, no way is that going to be the title? But you have to capture it, because then what happens, it gets the creative juices. Like you were in the zone of thinking about it, and that makes room for the right title to kind of find you, if you will. So I love that story, and that now, like try again, do over, right? We have all these do overs. I thought that was just really cool.
Really it. That's really it, right?
Right?
Because you do, like I did, some titles would last like an hour or two, some would last a day or two, but you're just like, that's not it. But you have to go through that process, and it's kind of just whittling away everything that isn't the title. And then you're like, okay, got it.
Yeah, I love it. And the other thing I love, the Avengers meets, Russell Crowe and the Gladiator. The premise, right? This has been the kind of the wars that have gone on, whether it's within or externally like that. But these we're all gladiators, we're all Avengers in a certain way. So I like how you did the past with the present. That was really cool. All right. So the picture, what was the picture on Instagram? Can I ask?
It was a woman in a black dress standing in a field of wheat. And like there was a little sky behind her that there was, like, it's in Europe. I didn't know exactly where, but and it just was, I just looked at the picture and it just like sparked something. And I was like, this is so beautiful. And I also had this, like, it's just this strange feeling that I wrote into the story, was someone who'd seen a picture, that they saw a picture and they knew they'd seen it somewhere before. And then that's sort of how the story unfolds.
I love it. I love it. So the inspiration for writing the book back in 2019, was it different than what you just described on how you titled the book? Or like, what was the inspiration behind this book? Because you've written several.
Yeah. I mean, this one really started out, like I said, about the social media thing. Like, why, like, you go, like, certainly even today, to a certain extent, you go into a Starbucks, you go into a Chipotle, you go into a place where anyone queues, and 90% of the people are like this, looking down at their phones. And you're like, what? And I'll give you a great example. So I was in Florida over the weekend, and flying back through Atlanta, someone stole my phone. Like, first, never lost a phone before. Yeah, it was crazy. And I had, like, it was sort of funny because I had my watch, so it's because of iPhone, so I could find my phone, but I couldn't get a connection to the Atlanta airport before I plane boarded. And so I got home, I reported it because it was on like a plan, and bricked it. And then I like searched it, and it was like somewhere in Gainesville, Florida. But for 48 hours, I had no phone. And it was kind of cool because I was like, I'm not tethered to this device. It's also a pain in the butt because, like, I needed to go places, and I'm like, oh, I have to remember how to get to this place, that otherwise I would just put my phone and let me be guided. But it was really, the original inspiration was, why do we do what we do? And how do we create a compelling version of ourselves, or a compelling future of who we want to be? Because ultimately the journeys we undertake in life aren't to get things, they're to become versions of ourselves that we haven't yet become. And that's really what the initial impetus was. And in some ways that becomes David's story through the book, is who does he need to become in order to kind of make things right? And I won't give too much of the book away. So in some ways it evolved, but initially it was just the social media thing, because even in the gym, you just saw how people communicated through their phones sometimes. And people in the gym with them, they're texting someone else in the gym. And you're just like, what is that? Is that how we communicate now? And obviously with the pandemic and technology now, the Zoom world has opened us up to a new way of communication, which is really cool, because we can connect and share messages in a way that we weren't necessarily instinctively wired to do so before the pandemic. But now it's a fantastic and amazing. But initially there was no, I mean, certainly when you think of the term being, there's a somewhat spiritual connotation to it because it's a state of being, but we're also human beings. But it certainly didn't have the spiritual dimension that it ended up with at the end.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. A couple of things you said there too, right? We're really tethered to our phone, and I am really good about not looking at my phone constantly. So when you said the 85 to 125, I have an Apple, I have an iPhone, and they send you the update every day, how much, or every week, how much more or less you were on your phone. And most times on average, it's like, I was on my phone maybe an hour a day, and that's checking, talking with my dad or checking emails or whatever it might be. So I really honor that. And ironically, I look at those stats to make sure that I'm not developing a bad habit of referencing my phone when I could be engaged with people. That was number one. Number two, the other thing I wanted to say, when my kids were little, because, Richard, my kids, they grew up with, David Richards, your last name is Richard, David, my kids growing up, we'd go out to dinner, and what would they be on their phone? So the rule became, for all of us, my husband and I included, while we're eating dinner, there is no cell phone use. Your friends call you or text you, you could get to them after. We're not that important that you can't give up an hour to be present. And do you know, they're still living at home, right? With the pandemic and everything. We don't use our phones at dinner. Ironically, I don't sit. Yeah, it became just a habit that we kind of all honor within the household. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, I know, like, when I'm training with a client, my phone I have for, to use for the time, just to make sure I give breaks and other things. But I tell people, put your phones away. I'm not checking my phone, right? We're not that important. That now, if we were surgeons, that I knew the kidney was coming in, right, and it's on ice and I have to get to the hospital, whole different thing. Then yeah, it should be a sidearm, because it's a tool to help us do our job, right? As organ donor, doing that kind of surgery. We're really not that important, yet we have this idea of self-grandeur that people care that I take a picture at night and post it on Facebook because I'm having a martini. Really? I am not that important, and I'm not that interesting. But I think we do that to pump our own tires, maybe, or because we want to keep up with what our friends are posting. So it becomes this whole game of chase versus who am I and how should I be showing up today, right? Does that make sense?
I love it absolutely does. And I love what you said in terms of, like, who am I and how am I showing up today? Because if you think about this, 20 years ago, presidents of the United States did not have the technology that we have now in our back pockets.
No.
They had probably the next best thing. They had whatever was closest, but it was because we afforded them that level of importance. And it was like, this person needs to have the very best technology possible. Now, virtually everyone has something that is bouncing off satellites, and you can send videos across the world instantly. And that is an incredibly powerful device. And so many people, unfortunately, let it own them instead of owning it. And I love that you're, like, averaging an hour. Obviously, you're on the low end of the bell curve in terms of how much you check it. There are people who obviously are doing a lot more than that. And that's really where the work is, because it is great to be like, I love when I post something and people like it. That's fantastic. It does not define who I am if I don't get the likes that I expect I should, because I have no expectations about, oh, I want this to get 1,000 likes. I mean, that's not where I'm gonna put my energy. Like, there's so much more to it. So it's fascinating. What I suspect is, as we kind of come out of the pandemic, and not that things are going to return to normal, but as we get a new view of what life is going to be like in this new world we live in, we're going to get a better handle on our phones, and we'll sort of understand holistically how to control the phone instead of letting it control us. So
yeah, somebody recently said, like, technology is, skyrocketing, and the human brain, human capacity is way down here. And the gap between the technology and how we can use it and still remain present, all of that, the gap is growing. So the technology, I like how you said that. We have to make sure that it doesn't control us, right? So that just a good caveat. All right, back to the book. So the book has a religious connotation, and yet I know through our correspondence that it wasn't a quote unquote religious book. Why did you, I'm curious that you leaned into that title and didn't talk yourself out of it, or the publisher didn't talk you out of it. Just curious, because it's not a religious book, right?
Yeah. It's for me, it was one, I wanted to write a super romantic, like Titanic-esque level romance. And it's got an element of that in it. There's a time travel element to it in terms of the idea is, and certainly because they're biblical figures, there's an element of that too, where people are like, well, but they're separated by 1,000 years. King David existed 1,000 years before the Virgin Mary. And so it was kind of like, first of all, I guess the easiest way to say it is, what would you do one day if you woke up and discovered you were a god? Like, that's kind of at the heart of the book. And to me, because I believe we're all gods, like that's sort of how I operate. And so for me, that was a really fascinating question to ask. At the same time, it had to be grounded in love, because ultimately love is one of the most powerful forces on the planet. And for me to turn it into a romance that no one's ever thought of was kind of exciting. And that was the opening for me. The other thing I'll say is, to me, when people say religious books embody movements, or religions are movements. Roman Catholicism,
Yeah.
Orthodox Judaism, Sunni Islam. Salvation, whatever that means to you, is a personal journey. And that's really what this book is this David's journey towards salvation and realizing who he is, and then what he has to do to sort of transform the planet that he's on.
I love it. I can't wait.
Thank you.
It's coming out December 8th of 2022. So the show will post before that. But I can't, I love you. I can't wait to read this book. I'm always looking for that great book. Knowing you also, like, I trust you as the author to take me on this amazing story and journey. And I know at the end, I will learn, right? Because I know you again. So anybody listening, you got to buy the book. It sounds fascinating. Number one, that the whole intrigue behind it is really cool. But again, me knowing you as the author and the military background and who you are as a person and your journey, I know that there's going to be major revelations for me on my journey and connecting dots for myself. Again, as you shine your light, it shines the light for me, right? My path. So I can't wait.
I just want to say that too. When you said that quote at the beginning of the show, it's so ironic, because one of the quotes I put into the book at the preface is a quote by Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor, the 81st or something Roman emperor, I don't remember. But it's basically that which does not transmit its own light creates its own darkness. And just when you said that, I was like, oh my God, that is so perfect that's what she's leading in with, because it just makes so much sense.
And we did not talk. I didn't ask him for a quote. I do my own thing, because then, and I read them. It's so funny because everybody's like, oh my God, she spends so much time. I take time writing my intros for my own reflection, but also choosing that right quote, because I feel like people learn from me. The quote sets the stage, and then they get an opportunity to learn from my guest. So it's almost like this little trifecta of inspiration, hopefully, but also of exposure from a little bit different vantage point, right? 3 kind of different perspectives, the quote from whoever that person is, my guest, and of course my own thought process on the topic. So you hope you're doing the right thing out there, David. It doesn't always mean that my way is the right way, but that's really the inspiration behind the show, and that perspective of the 3, right? The quote, my guest, and myself. Who was the audience for? If you had for people listening, like, how do they know if this is the right book for them on their journey of, and I'll use the word enlightenment?
Yeah, well, you said it earlier, right? We're all gladiators in a sense. And to me, Gladiator with Russell Crowe is one of my favorite movies. There's such a depth and texture to that movie. It just resonates. And regardless of where you are, you're at war with something. And it could be yourself, but it's part of the journey, right? We all are under our own hero or heroine's journey.
Yeah.
And so for me, one of the cool things about David is he really looks to get on top of the religions that have dominated much of human history. and say they're all just one love story. It's all just one love story, and I will explain that love story to you. And so for me, the audience is really, I focused it really towards women, because in the book, David looks to end the patriarchy that has dominated civilization. Like, that's the whole purpose of his resurrection, is like, okay, like, it's enough. Men, we've done a good thing. If we're all gods, now when you understand what that means, you realize, like, let's have genuine, authentic, real equality with the opposite sex, because that's what, like, a really beautiful world would look like.
I love it. I just love it. The work that you do as an executive coach, right? Trying to bring people to, and my words, and I'd like you to chime in on this, obviously, but you really help people get through their own crap to see a little bit more clarity, so they have a choice of the journey they choose, right? Or they feel more in control of their own journey versus, whatever life throws at me, I'll roll with the punches. So how does your work that you do with your clients, did that inspire part of the book? Are they separate? You know what I mean?
Certainly it was probably partly an inspiration. I mean, the biggest thing that controls all our lives are our values and beliefs.
Yeah.
What we value and what we believe. And ultimately, if you are stuck in an area of your life, it's because you have either values and beliefs in conflicts, or you have beliefs that are limiting you from accomplishing what you want to accomplish, what you're seeking to accomplish. And so really my work is focused on figuring out what those limiting beliefs are, and then helping them realize that there's an alternative path, and that all it is a belief that you can deconstruct or refuse to own anymore, and create an empowering belief that is going to help you move forward and advance in your life. And so in that sense, it kind of ties into what our next show will be about, living like you're in a movie. But every movie has a plot where the protagonist has to figure out how to solve the story. And so we're all storytellers. I'm a storyteller, you're a storyteller. Some of us write our stories down and put them in paper. Some of them just live our stories, but we are all storytellers. And so ultimately we all are trying to level up to the next level in our life. It's just a question of, how do you do that? How do you get focus and clarity in your life to understand, what do I need to change? Because the change has to come from within, in order for me to advance to the next level of my life.
Yeah. Change is hard, right? That's the whole premise of this show, is how do we navigate change, and between you and I and my other guests, it's hopefully providing those tips, that inspiration, that hope. I think hope, maybe more than anything, that no matter what change or situation we're put in, because sometimes we don't choose the change, right? It's thrust upon us. COVID, right? We were all thrust upon this situation that now there's an aftermath to it. How do you show up, right? How do you respond to those elements of change? And we need people like you, right? I help people with their business, but you help people with their own stuff, right? Our own limiting beliefs are stopping ourselves from living these amazing lives that we're really all here to achieve. We just don't all believe it yet. And that's, kind of where you come in the book, the inspiration behind the book. Hopefully after reading it, like I said, I know I'm going to come out with revelations after reading the book, and potentially new ways of looking at things. But at the end, I'm expecting me on my journey to either have more clarity of my path, or a shift in my journey, whatever it might be, because I know the depths of your lessons, but also what you want and how you help people transform their own lives, right?
Yeah, well, again, like, this beliefs are so powerful. Beliefs have shaped human history. And when you get stuck on a belief that is not serving you, a lot of times, and certainly even without the belief structure, if we just talk about more generally, so many people try to exert control over things they have no control over. And if we look in this country, I know pre-pandemic, I would check the news 5 or 6 times a day. And I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the news was on TV 2 or 3 times a day, period. There was no 24/7 news cycle. And it was useful, because then it was really what is essential to get out. But now every media company has their own script that they're playing out on. And these are businesses and their purpose is to make money. They're going to make money by creating as big a crisis that is going to compel people to watch as possible. And yet, if you spend your energy and time there, you have no control over that. But it can create stress, it can create worry. It certainly is going to stain or at least shape to some degree your perception of the world.
Absolutely.
And unless you're doing, and like, I'm not going to name names of media, but we know there's a right side to our media and there's a left side to our media. If you aren't spending time in both, then you are getting a tainted picture of what the world is, because they're saying this side is good, that side is bad, this is the way you want to go. And you can say, well, that's the truth. But it is the truth. It's your perception of a company whose sole purpose in life is to make more money for their shareholders. And so when it comes back to beliefs, if you want to change something, if you want to change how you see the world, that has to come from inside you.
Yeah.
There's no other way. You can't change something externally and expect that that's going to create a change in you. And yet so many people do that. And that's really where the work that you do and we do collectively is so important, is because you have to master the inner world in order to transform the outer world.
Yeah. And I'll just share a funny story, and we're almost out of time, but I do want to share you with everybody. About 10 years ago, I stopped watching the news. I remember I would come home, put it on to, what's going on in the world, right? You want to be relevant, you want to be up to date. And I remember I would be screaming at the TV because what they were saying was one-sided, whichever side, because it didn't matter to me what station I listened to. I was just trying to get, well, I'm cooking dinner, right? What's the update of what happened in the news? And my husband finally said, you can't watch the news anymore. I said, I can't watch it. I'm so anxious. I was making myself mentally and physically exhausted that I'm screaming at a TV. Now, fast forward, I think media has become even more polarized. And I like how you said, be careful. You want to look at both. And this is what I tell my kids, especially with election years and just staying, they need to know what's going on so that they can make educated decisions when they go to the voting polls, right? So I tell them you have to listen to both sides, and then where there's the overlap, that's the truth. And one night, the news was on, I don't know, was whatever station, and I was in bed and I was just flipping. I just wanted to watch a little TV on a Friday night, and it was one of, I don't even remember which, Fox, it was CNN, I don't remember what it was, but the point is, the gentleman said, well, our job is to help people interpret what's going on. And my head, again, I'm trying to go to bed. I'm like, so now I'm infuriated. And I said to my husband, and there lies the problem. Their job, I remember Walter Cronkite as a kid, their job was to report the factual information of the news. And we've gone so far from that I think the media believes that we need them to interpret information. Well, now what happened is it's their interpretation, their beliefs, their filters. Doesn't mean that that's where I'm coming from. So just the whole thing has become so dangerous. And you're right, having the phone, as our little sidearm, we're constantly getting updates, whether it's the social media or the media, on Twitter, whatever it might be, that we're constantly getting bombarded with other people's perspective and beliefs, not necessarily ours. And it's hard to discern what's out there and what's here and what I can control and what I can't control. And I think those lines get more and more blurred. It's a little scary.
It really is. And it reminds me of, I remember after September 11th, 2001, Peter Jennings was on ABC News as the anchor at the evening, and he got on, and I think it was right before President Bush was about to speak, and he said, no matter how you feel about him, he is still our president. And I realized, did he just say what I think he said? Like, why do you need to even color it in any way? And it's interesting because it led me to, during one of my time in the military, we had a media day where we brought media people in so we could ask them questions. And the question I asked was, whatever happened to objectivity? And there was some reporter who stood up, he said, well, and it was this very sort of meandering, long-winded answer. And then someone from CNN stood up and said, there is no objectivity. Like, there's an angle to every story, and that's what we do. We look for the angle and then we push that angle. And that is, you have to appreciate that dynamic exists. There's no virtue in the media. There is a story they're crafting, and it is a team that is focused on doing that. But again, their whole overall purpose is how to get more people to watch, how to get them to watch longer so that we make more money. That is it. And you realize, I love that you've not been doing it for 10 years, because it just comes down to where do you spend your energy? And, certainly for me, I love to be informed too. That in no way changes what I can do with my life or how I shape,
That's right.
my view of the world. It's a matter of, I want to live in a beautiful state every single moment of my life.
Right.
What do I need to do that on a daily basis?
Yeah. Yeah. People need you, Dave. They need you because it's a struggle and it's hard. It's hard to discern what do I have control, what don't I, what should I be believing, what shouldn't I, what are my beliefs, where did they come from? We are onions. As we peel back our darn layers of our onions, it's like, oh crap, there's another one, right? And then you peel it back, it's like, oh crap, there's another one. So, we need people to help us just figure out that path. Again, I
Yep.
go back to the quote, you shine the light so I could see my next step sometimes. And sometimes we can't see, we're in our own darkness because we don't know how to shine our light, right? It's like being in the dark room. The light switch is right here, but we're feeling around over here for the light switch. So we're
Yeah.
working in the dark, and all we have to do is flick the switch right by our right hand. So it's the same thing. We need people like you, the book that you've written. So here's the deal, guys. You all need him. Of course, you need David in your life. So go to his website, which is David Richards, plural, author.com, or with an S. And then if you have a question specific for David, email him at david.richards51, the number 5, the number 1, at gmail.com. And I will put the book link in. You are doing pre-orders, but the book will launch December 8th, 2022. So future listeners, the book will be available, but I will put that link in the show notes as well, so everybody could find it, Dave, and buy it and hopefully be inspired. The other thing I was going to say is, wow, what actually good timing of publishing the book on December 8th. Great stocking stuffer for family members or
Yeah,
anybody
absolutely.
who's interested in this kind of fun story, but again, with that underlying inspiration of hopefully improving our journey, making it a little bit easier, or providing clarity with wherever we are and where we're heading. So yeah, I love it. I love that you're doing it kind of a Christmas book, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Connie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. But
Always a
December
joy.
8th, really looking forward to it, and a beautiful love story, and it's got some action in it too. So
Yeah, we love love and action, right? Isn't that
yeah,
life?
that's exactly right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, one more time, I want to give the title of the book, Love Letters to the Virgin Mary. And then the subtitle is The Resurrection of King David. So check it out. I'll put it in the book link. Support David. And again, maybe improve your journey in your life through the messaging within the book. So David, as always, thanks so much. I love hanging out with you, kiddo. A real pleasure. Yeah, whatever the next program is, we'll have to get on and talk about, again, the inspiration behind it and how it kind of feathered out into existence. Because this is how these are how things are created. And these conversations inspire people to say, oh my gosh, I have an idea. I could create a course or whatever it is that they should bring to the world, again, just to shine their light a little brighter. So thank you so much. I love having you.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. And I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover, no matter where you on your journey, change, whatever's happening in your life. I truly hope my guests and I provide some inspiration, tips, ideas, and strategies that you can implement immediately. Information is beautiful. I know I'm a broken record, but when you take that information, put it into action, watch the magic that happens around you. Truly honored that you're here with me on this journey, listening to the show. You've been listening to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.net. I wish you all an inspired week filled with joy and love and just all good things. You can make the magic happen in your life. Take some of the tips and ideas that David and I talked about today, implement them, report back how to go. Hopefully a lot easier than what you've been dealing with currently. Thanks again. I'll see you all next week. Have an amazing week.